I was growing up, my family owned a cabin in Hancock, New York, in the Catskills. It was mainly used for hunting, but we'd also drive up there to hike, ride quads, make campfires, s'mores, and just be in nature. This cabin was small. It was actually a trailer that was affixed into the ground and then added up onto slightly. Because of this, my cousin and I would share a big bed in the main part of the trailer, and my dad would sleep on the couch. We were all virtually in the same room. One night, when I was about 10, I woke up to use the bathroom in the middle of the night and saw a man standing at the end of the bed staring at me. I knew instantly he was a ghost, as he was translucent and was dressed like he was from the mid-1800s. Quickly, I threw the cover over my head and squeezed next to my cousin, terrified. I must have passed out because the next thing I knew, I was on the floor of the trailer next to the couch. I could hear my dad snoring loudly, but every time I tried to reach out to wake him, something would grab my hand and pull it back. The next morning, I woke up on the floor of the trailer with my hands over my head. I woke up in an even weirder position the following night, when my cousin and I awoke with the bed covered in vomit. It was from me, but I had no recollection of throwing up, and I'd never thrown up in my sleep before, and that's where things got even more creepy. The next 2 times that I went to the cabin, I ended up waking up covered in my own vomit, with barely any recollection of throwing up. This is something that has never happened to me before, but yet it was happening constantly at the cabin. Eventually, we sold the cabin, though years later I was told that a family member once claimed to see a UFO landing into the yard when he got up to use the toilet at 3 a.m. Even now, over 20 years after the incident, I still remember it vividly and firmly believe that that cabin is possessed by something inhuman. A friend and I were taking a ghost tour of Edinburgh's underground vaults below South Bridge. These ancient rooms had been used by tradesmen for storage, but all manner of creepy stories surround them. Some say serial killers used them to hide bodies. Others say plague victims were left here to meet their bitter end. Most of the tour was designed for tourists, including a member of staff jumping out to scare us. Our guide also told us that many guests had odd experiences in the days following the tour. He told us that car radios start out of the blue, and household items mysteriously move around. I passed this off as just another tall tale for tourists, although not for long. My friend and I returned to our apartment and went to bed. Something must have disturbed me because I found myself awake in the middle of the night. I was groggy, but something wasn't right. The door was moving. It swung from fully open to closed, creaking as it did so. I was no longer groggy. There was a reasonable explanation. I knew if I could just think of it fast enough. Yes, my friend had probably gone to the bathroom and pulled the door closed behind her. I mustered up the courage to roll over, praying to see an empty side to the bed. No, she was fast asleep beside me. I lay there shivering, aware there was no explanation for what I had just experienced. The next morning, I felt unsettled and flicked through my photos from the tour. I stopped on one that I had taken in almost complete darkness down in the vaults. 2 bright neon lights, scratches like fingernails, ran across the screen, despite the fact that there had been no lights in the room where it was taken. I decided to email it to the tour company to see what they would say. The cheery manager replied, "They saw many unexplained photos like this, and did I mind if they kept it for their database?" I didn't mind, I told him, but secretly my mind was running into overdrive. What on earth had I witnessed in Edinburgh? I stayed at the Stoneleigh Hotel while attending a convention in Dallas. It has a penthouse suite that has hosted Elvis Presley, John Lennon, and many other famous guests. At the time I stayed there, the penthouse stood empty because it was undergoing renovations. Late one night, I befriended a security guard who invited me, along with one of my co-workers, to tour the penthouse. We immediately took him up on the offer. He explained that one of the rooms contained a hidden door that led to an elevator. Apparently one of the previous owners had installed it so he could easily access a room on a different floor, where his mistress stayed. The guard informed us that one of the ladies had fallen to her death in that elevator shaft. He said employees could sometimes still hear the creaking sounds of the elevator, even though it was no longer in use. My friend and I separated as we meandered through all of the rooms on the penthouse level. Even under its state of construction, the beauty of the space was clearly evident. We both had cameras with us and took lots of photos. At one point, I wandered down a narrow hallway that appeared to be a servant's prep area of some sort, which led to the kitchen. The lights weren't functioning at the time, and it was after midnight, so it was difficult to make out all of the details. Once I was a few steps into the space, I immediately felt cold, and my instinct told me to turn around, so I did. I continued exploring the rest of the space and eventually met up with my friend on one of the balconies. We chatted with the security guard for a few moments, thanked him, and left. It wasn't until the next day when we were driving home from the convention that we started discussing the details of the penthouse. I asked if she noticed the dark hallway that led to the kitchen, and she said yes. I told her I'd started to walk down that hallway but stopped myself because it felt cold and creepy, even evil. She was nodding her head in agreement and started excitedly telling me how she'd started walking into the same place and had been overcome with a feeling of pure evil. She described it as a very tangible physical sensation, and she'd immediately turned around and left the space. We were both fascinated that we'd felt almost the exact same feelings in this exact same area, yet neither of us mentioned it to the other until almost a full day later. It's still one of the craziest experiences I've had in a hotel. Interestingly, I found out that the hotel is known to be haunted when I did some digging on Google. Apparently, I'm not the only one who's had this creepy experience here.